Politics and current affairs are concerned, and we of course are going to be taking a look at more news and the politics that's happening locally, internationally, and COVID-19 has not ceased to be a huge topic across the world and in Kenya. So the press, I imagine, are taking a look at that and giving us more diverse views of what's happening as far as that is concerned. Welcome to the show for that and much more.
All right, and later on we're also going to be speaking to the Director General for the Nairobi Metropolitan Service, and that is Major General Mohammed Abdallah Badi, who has taken over the county or certain county functions after the bringing in of the Nairobi Metropolitan Service. Many of us will remember that at the point where the national government took over some county government operations, he was tasked with the job of doing that. Recently, on June 30th, he handed over his 100-day scorecard to the president, and we'd like to find out what are some of the achievements that he feels he has made, and more so, the vision that he has for Nairobi. That's all coming up right here, and of course, we welcome you to participate in the conversation as usual.
That is a conversation you do not want to miss out on in studio here, and remember, you can be a part of it by participating in our questions that we're asking you on Twitter this morning. We would like to know, are you impressed by what the Nairobi Metropolitan Services has achieved during its first 100 days in office? Are you impressed by what the Nairobi Metropolitan Services have achieved during this first 100 days in office? Let us know what you think. You can compare to the first 100 of the county government days of the county government and see, especially if you are frequently in the city or part of the infrastructure that make up this particular city. If you live here, if you work here in the city, tell us what you think, because you have experienced it firsthand. I'm at Strix Ingado. Michael's at Michael G. Gitonga, and the hashtag to use on this one is KTN Morning Express. We would like to know what you think, and we will make it a part of the discussion that we will have in a while. But first, let's take a look at the papers and see what's making headlines. And it's quite interesting because the major story this morning is what we were discussing yesterday, and that has to do with revenue allocation, and now it is tense and there is a stalemate in the Senate. Joining me to have this discussion on the top stories and more is Honorable John Bunyasi, who's the Member of Parliament for Nambale. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much, Trix.
Right, now let's start off with the Standard this morning, and it's put it very plainly for those who are looking to understand or probably trying to figure out whether they are affected by this particular revenue allocation formula. They're the gainers and the losers. And they have put forward, or rather put on the front page, a map that shows the red to represent the biggest losers, as has been indicated quite clearly right there on the front page. And the gainers, the biggest gainers, are in green. And as you can see, we are having the green with areas that are much more populated, and that means they are being allocated more funds, and that was the argument that people living in this area need more because there are more, even though they located in a much smaller part. But then we're having the other areas that have vast land mass rather, but then they're getting much less. And the argument for these areas is that they are less developed, and therefore they still need much more allocation. Now we're being told that Raila Ruto fight Uhuru cash plan. What do you make of the political twist that this developing story has taken?
Thank you very much, Trix. This is truly a tricky thing for former combatants that have had to find new accommodation.
Yes.
First of all, in the long term, it's the population that really should take center stage. However, certain areas, even if they are less populated, must have sufficient critical investments for essential resources like health,
yes,
perhaps education, and so on. And indeed, over time, people tend to move to areas where there are job opportunities, and those might be in the densely populated cities because of the service industry. But there may also be opportunities in areas that were relatively less densely populated. And if they are less densely populated simply because of climate or lack of infrastructure, government can also have special funding on top. This is a shareable revenue.
Yes.
That is calculated on the basis of those parameters that are agreed. But you can always have specific conditional inputs, conditional grants that support specific areas. For example, we have counties that are on the LAPSET corridor.
Yes.
The cost of infrastructure and development there is going to be much higher than would have been justified if it was simply to meet internal needs because of the thinness of population. But however, they are an important leg in connecting ends that are really important. And over time, population will also again grow in those areas. So I think this is a tight one. I know that the presidency was very keen to get the formula passed as was, but clearly there has to be a give and take within the Senate, and they may shave off the extremes, extremes of it. The extreme losses may be shaved off. And extreme gains may be shaved off.
But Mheshimiwa, when it comes to this, when you talk about grants and other conditional funding, it is not a given. And I think that's where some of the leaders from these areas are become very jittery when it comes to revenue allocation. So they would rather it be just a part of the budget that they are allocated, or the revenue that they're allocated, so that they can have something to work with from the get-go without worrying about how we are going to deal with our unique difficulties or challenges in our areas. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I do agree. And personally, what I think would be useful, would have been useful, is as you deal with these revisions in the formula, and population begins to take a bigger role than it did before. Yes, you have to remember that areas that are less densely populated still need basic critical infrastructure and perhaps critical services. I think what would be good would be for government to say, working through the devolution model, this is what we are going to do in shareable revenue that you are allowed, that you can access on the basis of this formula. The formula would leave out, I would say, government can say, because the formula may not favor counties that have been using the previous formula, this new formula will not favor the old counties.
Yes.
The counties can then, government can then say, over time, we are going to make special investments, maybe in education, support education infrastructure, or roads in those areas, or any other services that are limited by virtue of the smallness of population. Government must, at the end of the day, develop all of the areas within its bracket. And areas may be small in population, but huge in natural resource potential.
For sure.
And you won't get there unless you develop the critical human resources there, or the social services that are needed, or the big infrastructure. In some of the larger counties, counties like, say, Garissa, Marsabit, and many other of the large counties, getting a road must go from point A to point B, say, connecting market centers or other population centers. That if it was in, say, a smaller county like Vihiga, point A to point B may just be 3 kilometers.
Yeah.
And you have close to 200,000 people perhaps you're connecting. But in the larger counties, it will take a lot more. So there is a minimum critical investment that could connect centers in Wajir or Marsabit, as an example, or Turkana or Narok, that must then be put in place, otherwise it will be perpetually left out. That's why I need special programs outside of these regular ones. Yeah. And that can be announced as part of the medium-term strategy or long-term strategy. And those countries would want to see budget allocations meeting those promises that government makes.
Absolutely.
Yes, that is a question of trust, and there are issues there.
Yeah, and so basically what you're saying is the onus is on the government to ensure that they level the playing field. And
over time,
yes. Over time.
Yes.
But so that when they get these funds, even though they are on part of the list that has been dubbed as the losers, they can actually know that, well, we're not gaining in this way, but the ministry is going to develop mining in this country, or, you know, the health sector, or what have you, whatever unique difficulties they have. Now, when you take a look at the front page of the Daily Nation, you're being given that list of those who are winning and those who are losing if senators adopt the new CRA proposal without changes. So Nairobi, Kiambu, Nakuru, Kakamega, Bungoma, Kilifi are some of the winners, while the losers include Isiolo, Tana River, Taita Taveta, Tharaka Nithi, Marsabit, and Vihiga. And when you look at the geographical map that has been put on the front page of the Standard, you can understand those those differences. Now, impeachment is another story that has been developing on and on. You think you have seen the last of it, then it rears its head in another county, and this time it is Kitui County. And on the front page of the Daily Nation, it's being teased, Ngilu escapes impeachment as motion fails. The front page of the Standard is giving us more details. We're being told that 15 MCAs mysteriously disappeared hours before this, ouster motion was being put forth. What do you make of this?
Well, this is interesting. Each country has its own twist in democracy.
Yeah.
And this disappearance of legislators is a no trick where people try and take away people from the center of action so that you don't get the numbers that you need.
Yeah.
But I think that this issue has been discussed a lot on your program over time, that these impeachments is part of the adjustment in our democratic processes. They seem to be many, but I think also because we have very many issues coming up. In the case of Honorable Ngilu, I think she's escaped on a technicality. I guess the most important thing would be that going forward, both she and the county assembly side would look at the structural problems that are facing them, that are leading to these demands for impeachment. And of course, the governor has a chance then maybe to demonstrate that the problem doesn't lie with her side of things, maybe lies elsewhere, but that process should be allowed to occur. Not the impeachment, but the attempts or the actual success at impeachment. That process should be allowed to settle in its own natural democratic way. If you deal with it artificially, there's going to be always interventions to save a particular person,
yes,
and not to save and not correct the underlying factors that are leading to that kind of disagreement. Yeah.
Now, when you look at the sincerity of the MCAs, that is something that has been come into question. Are they just disliking a certain governor? Are they having personal political issues? Or is this a matter of our people are not receiving what they voted for? So as an outsider, when you look at these stories, how can you tell? Is this disappearance of 15 MCAs point to a lack of sincerity or just politics as usual? How can you tell when a county government, county assembly is working for the good of the people that voted them in? Okay,
it is a complex issue.
Yeah.
But let me just attempt to give my take on it. One is that there are enough grounds in this country everywhere for people to be unhappy and to blame somebody or to feel that the administration is not doing what they should be doing, or to feel that their needs are not being met. So there are all kinds of grounds. However, in each county, and I don't want to discuss Kitui specifically because I don't have the numbers for Kitui, but in each county there are serious issues between how much of the resources go to the executive and how much of it goes to the legislative arm of the county assembly. And there have been genuine discussions right from the transitional authority days, and it has continued as devolution has continued to take root, that the allocations, particularly the assembly side, are considered inadequate to get them to carry out their mandate of oversight.
Yes.
And there have been discussions that the allocations right from the center should go directly to the assemblies or go directly to the executive. That's one. Two, you know that Kenya has succeeded quite a lot in terms of education. So people are aware. They are reading the internet and they can see what's happening all around the world.
For sure.
And then, therefore, that is leading to a greater deficit in expectations. That here is where we are, that's where we could be. In a sense, people are virtually traveling to various parts of the world, as it were, right from their own homesteads. So there is a spike in expectations, and the executives are not perhaps able to meet, so they get under pressure for that.
Right.
And two, they may be seeing uses of funds that they think are suboptimal, they think are not as good as they could be. And so they come out and they speak out. Now we have 47 such centers, 48 actually, including the national government, where things like these are happening. And with these noises, people are getting impatient that maybe the model is producing too many, we have 47 counties and there are going to be too many cases of attempted impeachment. I think we should accept it. It's just, in fact, I think that's less than reality. The reality will be much, much worse. So we need a bit of patience over time but it's going to be uncomfortable.
Yes. Now let's take a look at page 14 of the Daily Nation, and this is the editorial cartoon this morning, and it speaks volumes because we're being told about the PPEs, the equipment that medics need in order to protect themselves. Over 400 of them have been infected by COVID-19, and we have had reports of some losing their lives to this virus. Now, when you look at this cartoon this morning, it actually just aptly captures that message, because this individual who's giving a presser to the public, when you look from the other side, you would think that they have, but on the back side, literally, they're wearing half that hazmat suit. So speaking volumes, communicating quite aptly that the situation on the ground, as many would say, is different. What do you make of this, and how we are not actually being optimal in protecting those who are meant to take care of us when we are facing this particular virus?
I think this, yes, you're right. This cartoon certainly pictures it extremely well. And all around the world we know that if you do not take care of your frontline workers, you lose the battle. Yeah. Because it's through them that the rest of us have an element of peace. But if they are not taken care of themselves, they are exposed. It demoralizes. It may lead, of course, to loss of life, but it also may mean that people would be unwilling to continue under those circumstances. I think in the value chain of our COVID investments, yes. I think that in Kenya, I think it's very, very important that due attention is given. There have been very many, what now seem to be valid complaints, that resources are not being used for what they were intended for. That the transparency of how much and how far and how fast the government is moving is able to move, for example, to provide the protective, personal protective equipment, is that information doesn't come out clearly. When you hear the daily briefs that come from the minister, now they have become like a monologue. You can almost say what the next sentence would be. Yes. But there is no analysis whatsoever to say we have put aside X amount of resources, and this is the physical progress that we are making. There's a physical progress on the provision of PPEs. There's a physical progress on the provision of beds in hospitals and so on. There's a physical quantum you can have on the compensation to workers and so on. We need to get a more comprehensive brief. I was in the village the other day, and the children are making fun of the minister trying to, mimic how he presents it. It's predictable. I think we need to go deeper. We must go deeper. In the analysis of what's happening in counties, for example, we talk about PPEs now. I think we should have the numbers. It should say Busia has X number of frontline workers, and they have 10% of the PPEs or 50% of the PPEs. And let there be numbers that are verifiable. This is extremely important, and with that kind of information, the people on the ground will also be in a better position to put pressure, perhaps on their county governments, or put pressure on other persons and so on as the case might be. So I think this is pointing to the fact that we are too concerned in providing a good face, as it were, but we are really not paying sufficient attention to the issues that are internal to it, which are really, really important. And government can't cure them all. Even around the world, there are issues. But around the world, they're discussing openly where they want to go and where they are. That we need to bring on board in these regular briefings.
Absolutely. And now, when speaking of COVID and what it has cost us, when you look at page 3 of the Standard, we're told about academician who is renowned, quite renowned from Western Kenya, Maurice Wamangoli, who has been taken from us owing to COVID-19. And we do know that this actually affects people of a certain age, and this is why even schools are closed, because the children are more vulnerable, and we are told even not to travel up country to our elderly relatives, because we might be exposing them to while they already have pre-existing conditions. Now, speak to that, and of course the segments of the paper that are focusing squarely on teachers and how schools are being closed, and a lot of them are suffering because, particularly those who were teaching in private schools and now have basically no source of income.
Yes, thank you very much. We've been told from studies done in other countries there are certain age brackets that are particularly vulnerable in respect of the COVID-19. or similar challenges. Older people tend to have naturally to develop, as the body weakens, complications of existing conditions that make them particularly vulnerable.
Yeah.
But I have not seen Kenyan level studies that then say that the phenomenon in Kenya is going on as follows. For example, if you're in Italy or the United States, in the European countries, a lot of the older people are in homes. So you have already congregated them in one place, and there are people who are easily susceptible to these kinds of problems. And you can get, it's like a fire in a dense, dry forest. It sort of will burn across very fast. But if you are in one of our thinly populated areas where people are far apart, communication is less than in those places, maybe the way that this moves will be slightly different. I think we should get a bit more information, and Kenyans are quite informed. They'll be able to pick up that. For example, the other day they were saying that the biggest risks, even with respect to churches, is 58 and above. But each time I listen to the minister, the range of deaths is not necessarily in that category.
Yes.
It seems to go everywhere from near 1 to, in fact, I think at one time the majority of numbers were below 59.
Yes.
So what was it that was happening in Kenya that's different? It's partly because the underground profile of people in Kenya is not the same as in Europe.
Okay.
We have a lot of cases here of respiratory problems that have been there with us. We have HIV and so on, which is not gone yet. We have bodies weakened, as it were, with the malaria and the pre-existing conditions, many of them, that makes them a bit weaker to resist this. So I think we do need to get epidemiological studies, logical studies that are specific to Kenya and may even be differentiated across the country. We are not, how people live in Lamu is not the same way how people live in Busia.
For sure.
And I think our academics are being a little lazy on this one. Now, however, you can see that this is a very costly thing, almost like the way HIV was when it came. If it takes away people like Professor Mangoli and others like that, and our doctors and our nurses and so on, the people that are really crucial in the development society, it's a very, very costly thing. And I hope that, and I want to add this one, very important. Some people still believe that this COVID is not a real thing. And I hope that when they see cases like this, they do realize, they do know that it is a real thing, and there's nobody who is safe from it.
Absolutely.
It's actually very, very disappointing. There are still people who say, but you know anybody, but you know anybody. I tell them, then you are lucky if you do not know. And I think it's time that Kenyans began to accept this fully. Now, the impact on the medium, long-term impact on schools and on our livelihoods and on our social fabric is very, very major.
Absolutely.
And I think we are going to we will continue to experience it long into the future.
Literally, we are having parents telling teachers or other school owners telling their parents to transfer children to other schools because they are just closing down. They have no way of sustaining.
They cannot survive.
Yeah, they cannot survive in this particular environment. And speaking of surviving, businesses have taken a hit due to COVID-19, but at the same time, the economy was already not very friendly to certain types of businesses. And this morning, we're being told on the front page, or rather, it's being teased on the front page of the Standard, that Tuskys runs out of stock amid huge pile of debt. Now, 2 years ago, Tuskys says Tuskys was the region's largest retailer. Right now, we're speaking of a completely different narrative. It seems that these sorts of businesses cannot be sustained well in the Kenyan economy. Could you explain to us, as an economist, why this is? And at the same time, how come other countries do not face these similar problems? They seem to fare on very well with large retail enterprises.
Thank you very much indeed. I think this tells us various things. One, it tells us that size is not necessarily good. That being bigger does not mean you are better. And you may be bigger with thin profit margins, very thin, and therefore means that you have to tighten it such that you really can't afford a slack. That's why some of the retailers that are monitoring their bottom line almost by the second realize that we are headed in heavy waters, and perhaps before they get there, they get out. Or if they can't restructure and begin to predict clearly when they'll make improve their margins or make the profits they're looking for, or profit levels they're looking for, they get out of the market. In many countries, the reason we don't hear about this all the time, but it does happen quite a lot.
Yes.
I can say a bit about the United States, which I've observed and been there for a long time, that these changes for them are continuous. You can find your favorite store that you have seen for 30 years, suddenly you go there, it has a different name on it. Why? Somebody else has acquired
Change of ownership, yes.
Yes, and why? Because they were unable to manage their costs relative to the market returns in a way that they can remain profitable. You must be able to have sufficient flexibility in the market when you look ahead and you find that we are not going to get into the profit levels we have had, therefore we must reduce either to maintain them or even to sustain them through a difficult period. And the last thing might be that
briefly,
we do not rely sufficiently on stock markets. The good thing there is that the stock market will know when you are not making profits and they begin to move away from you, and then maybe you can readjust.
You can change tact and
but here I think this has caught us off foot, and unfortunately because Tuskys was growing by leaps and bounds, but maybe the profit levels were not growing as in tandem.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much. Honorable John Bunyasi is the Member of Parliament of Nambale, as well as an economist. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to have more discussions. Today, we're focusing on the first 100 days of NMS and how you feel it has achieved is what we'd like to hear from you. Achieved in Nairobi, that is what we'd like to hear from you on Twitter. Tell us what you think, and we will be making you a part of the conversation. But for now, a short breather.